Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time. Not to a glamorous palace or a city of wonders, but to a place and an era that pop culture has made incredibly famous, yet profoundly misunderstood: the Viking Age. We're going to step into the shoes of an average person living in 9th century Scandinavia, and I have to be honest with you, you probably wouldn't last the first day. The reality was less about glorious horned helmets which they didn't wear, by the way, and more about grinding, relentless hardship. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel more than you know. And as we settle in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. No, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into 2 nights' journey together. The first thing you become aware of isn't sight, but smell. A thick, heavy, and deeply complex aroma fills your nostrils. It's a cocktail of old wood smoke, unwashed bodies, damp wool, animal moss, and the faint, lingering scent of last night's stew. It's the kind of smell that doesn't just hang in the air. It feels like it's soaked into the very fabric of existence. You try to take a deeper breath, and it catches in your throat, a smoky, acrid bite that makes your eyes water before you've even opened them. Slowly, you peel your eyelids apart. There is no gentle morning light, no sunbeam cutting across a cozy room. There is only a dim, hazy twilight, a perpetual dusk, even though you know the sun must be rising outside. The only source of light comes from the center of the vast, cavernous room, a long, rectangular fire pit, or longhouse, where embers from last night's fire still glow with a weak, orange pulse. A thin, lazy column of smoke drifts upwards, not into a chimney, but towards a simple hole in the thatched roof. Most of the smoke, however, doesn't make it. It spreads out, creating a permanent, stinging haze that hovers about 6 feet from the floor. You understand now why everyone seems to have a persistent cough. You're lying on something hard. It's a raised wooden platform that runs along the length of the wall. Your mattress is a compressed pile of straw, maybe with a few scratchy animal pelts thrown on top for a touch of what passes for luxury. Your blanket is a heavy, greasy square of undyed willow fabric called lull. It's incredibly warm, but it's also stiff and carries the same complex bouquet of smells as the air around you. You shift, and the straw rustles loudly. Next to you, a body stirs. It's one of your family members, maybe a sibling or a cousin. There are no private bedrooms here. Your parents, your siblings, aunts, uncles, and a few other assorted relatives all sleep, eat, and live in this one single space, the longhouse. Your gaze travels across the shadowy expanse. The building is immense, maybe 60 or 70 feet long. The curved walls, designed to look like an overturned ship, are made of timber, planks, or wattle and door, a mix of woven lattice and sticky clay. There are no windows, only the smoke hole and the heavy wooden doors at either end. It's a design born of pure function to keep the brutal Scandinavian winter out. As your eyes adjust, you can make out the shapes of others. A dozen, maybe 2 dozen. People are still huddled under their own wool blankets. You hear a symphony of snores, coughs, and murmurs. From the far end of the longhouse, a different sound reaches you, the soft, shuffling, low grunt of a pig. Yes, in the dead of winter, it's not uncommon for the most valuable livestock to be brought inside to share the warmth. This is a key point of contention for scholars. Historians still debate just how common it was for families to share their living space with livestock. Some archaeological finds suggest separate, attached by rays or barns, while other sagas and accounts imply a much closer, more intimate cohabitation, especially during the harshest months. Was it a practical way to keep both humans and animals from freezing, or was it a sign of lower status? The answer, like so many things from this time, is lost in the smoke-filled air. Use it up, and the cold air immediately attacks your exposed skin. The fire provides a little warmth, but only if you're sitting right beside it. Your clothes are lying in a heap next to you. It's a simple wool tunic and trousers. They are the same clothes you wore yesterday while mending a fence. They'll be the same clothes you wear today to do, well, whatever needs doing. The concept of a wardrobe, of changing for different occasions, is an alien one. You pull the tunic over your head. The fabric is rough against your skin, and you can feel the grime from days of wear. A quick glance at your hands reveals dirt caked under your fingernails and calluses on your palms. This is your reality. The day has barely begun. And already, the romantic image of the fearless Viking explorer feels like a distant fantasy. Your first challenge of the day isn't to conquer a foreign shore, but simply to get up and face the cold, smoky, that overwhelmingly crowded morning. You swing your legs over the side of the wooden platform, your bare feet meeting the cold, packed earth floor. It's a shock, but a familiar one. The embers in the long fire offer no warmth from this distance. As you stand, a pressing, universal human need makes itself known. It's time to use the facilities. You glance around the dim longhouse, a place of shared breath and shared space, and realize privacy is a concept that simply doesn't exist here. But for this particular task, a little bit of solitude is required. Carefully, you begin to navigate the obstacle course of your sleeping family. You step over an uncle's outstretched arm, sidestep a pile of boots, and tiptoe around a cousin who has rolled off the platform and is now curled up near the wall. Every rustle of your tunic, every creak of the floorboards under your weight feels amplified in the relative quiet. The air is still thick with smoke, but now you're standing. Your head is in the thickest part of the haze. Your eyes sting, and you hold a shallow breath as you make your way towards the massive wooden door at the end of the longhouse. It's not a door you can simply turn a knob on. This is a heavy slab of wood, barred from the inside with a thick timber beam. Lifting it out of its brackets requires a grunt and a surprising amount of effort. You slide the door open just enough to slip through, and as you do, the outside world rushes in to greet you. And it is not a gentle greeting. A blast of frigid, damp air hits you like a physical blow, stealing the breath from your lungs and making the skin on your face feel tight and frozen. The grey light of dawn reveals a world painted in muted shades of brown and grey. There's no manicured lawn, no charming garden path. The ground immediately outside the longhouse is a treacherous sea of mud, churned by the daily traffic of people and animals. Now, where are the conveniences used in the area? There's the woodpile, a stack of firewood essential for survival. There's a rack where fish are hung to dry. And over there, a growing pile of everything. This is the maiden, the household garbage dump. It's a mound of ash from the fire pit, discarded animal bones from last night's meal, broken pottery, food scraps, and general waste. It's an archaeologist's treasure trove. But to you, it's just the smelly pile you try to avoid. You finally spot the toilet. It isn't a building. It's not even a proper outhouse. It's a simple, shallow trench dug a short distance from the longhouse, or perhaps just a designated area behind a large rock. There is no roof, no walls, no door. Your only privacy is the vast, indifferent Scandinavian landscape and the hope that no one else has the same idea at the same time. You trudge through the cold mud, the icy slush seeping into the gaps of your poorly made leather shoes. The wind whips your tunic around your legs. Relentless and chilling, you find a spot, crouch down, and get the job done as quickly as humanly possible, your teeth chattering. The exact layout and sanitation standards of Viking-era farms are a topic of ongoing discussion among archaeologists. By analyzing the chemical composition of the soil around excavated longhouses, they can identify areas with high concentrations of phosphates, which signals where human and animal waste was deposited. Yet, they still debate the details. Was there a strict system, with designated zones for different types of waste, or was it a more chaotic, throw it out the door approach? The evidence varies from site to site, suggesting that hygiene was a very local and personal standard. You pull your tunic tight, shivering, and begin the quick walk back to the relative warmth of the longhouse. Your feet are cold and muddy. The wind has chilled you to the bone. Your day has begun with a stark reminder of your place in the world, exposed, vulnerable, and with very few comforts. The simple, private act of using a restroom has been a trial of endurance, and the sun has barely risen. You slide back through the heavy door, replacing the wooden bar with a solid thud that echoes in the longhouse. The air inside, which just moments ago felt suffocating and foul, now feels almost cozy by comparison. The smoky haze is a welcome shield against the biting wind you just escaped. More people are stirring now. The longhouse is slowly coming to life, filled with the groans and coughs of a family waking up. Someone has tended to the fire, adding fresh wood, the embers of coal, and a lively flame now dances in the central pit, casting flickering, long shadows on the walls and ceiling. The smell of cooking is beginning to cut through the other, less pleasant aromas. One of the women, your mother or an aunt, is already at work by the fire, stirring a large iron cauldron that hangs from a hook suspended from the rafters. The promise of food, of warmth in your belly, is a powerful motivator. You make your way over to the fire, jostling for a position close enough to feel the heat on your chilled hands. You peer into the cauldron. Inside is a bubbling, thick, greyish porridge. This is hofragrauti, oatmeal porridge, the staple breakfast of your world. It's made from oats, or sometimes barley, boiled with water or, on a good day, milk. Don't expect any of the modern luxuries you might associate with oatmeal. There's no brown sugar, no cinnamon, no fresh berries artfully arranged on top. If you're lucky, a spoonful of honey might be stirred in for the whole pot, or perhaps a few dried, shriveled berries from last autumn's harvest. But most days, it's just the plain, unadorned grain. Your mother ladles a scoop of the steaming gruel into a simple wooden bowl and hands it to you. You find a spot on the bench and begin to eat with a carved wooden spoon. The porridge is hot, which is its best quality. It's bland, a little gritty, but it fills your stomach and provides the energy you'll desperately need for the day's labor. Alongside the porridge, you're handed a piece of bread. It's not a light, airy loaf. It's a dense, dark, and incredibly hard flatbread, likely made from rye or a mix of whatever grains were available. It's tough to chew, and you have to gnaw at it, your jaw working hard. This is the kind of bread that could last for months without spoiling, a practical necessity for long winters and sea voyages. You dunk a piece into your porridge to soften it, a trick you learned as a child. As you eat, you look at what others are having. It's the same. The chieftain or head of the household might get a slightly larger portion, or perhaps a piece of cheese or dried fish on the side. But the core meal is identical for everyone. Food is fuel, not an experience. The Viking diet was heavily reliant on what could be grown, hunted, or preserved. That means a lot of grains, root vegetables like turnips and carrots, which were often pale or purple, not orange, and a great deal of dairy in the form of milk, butter, and skyr, a thick, sour cheese-like product. Meat was a luxury, while the sagas are full of descriptions of grand feasts with roasted pork. These were special occasions. For the average person, a bit of salted pork or mutton in a stew was a rare treat. Most protein came from fish, either fresh caught from a nearby fjord, more often dried or salted to last through the winter. Here's a curious little detail: your teeth are probably in terrible shape, and it's not from sugar. Archaeologists examining Viking skeletons have found that their teeth were often worn down to an extreme degree. This was primarily from decay, but from abrasion. The stone grinding wheels used to make flour would inevitably shed tiny bits of grit into the grain. Decades of eating this gritty bread would literally sand down the enamel on their teeth, sometimes right down to the pulp, leading to painful abscesses and infections. You're tough. Hard bread isn't just a chore to eat, it's actively destroying your teeth with every bite. Historians are still piecing together the specifics of the Viking diet. and a key debate revolves around its sufficiency. Skeletons from the period often show signs of nutritional stress, like lines of arrested growth in the bones, suggesting periods of famine or severe food shortages. Failed harvest due to a late frost or a wet summer could be catastrophic. So was the typical diet a robust one that fueled their famous expansions? Or were many Vikings living on the edge of malnutrition, with raiding becoming a desperate necessity rather than a choice? The answer is likely both. Varying greatly by region, social status, and the luck of the harvest year. You finish your last spoonful of porridge and wipe your bowl clean with the last piece of hard bread. The meal is over. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't delicious. But it was necessary. Your stomach is full, and a little warmth is spreading through you. It's time to work. The brief respite of the morning meal is done, and the long day of labor is about to begin. With the meager warmth of your breakfast settling in your stomach, you follow the other able-bodied members of your family out of the longhouse and back into the unforgiving morning. The sun is higher now, but it's a weak, watery sun that offers little warmth. The air remains crisp and cold. Today, like most days during the planting season, your destination is the field. The field is not a vast, rolling pasture of rich, dark earth. It's a modest, irregularly shaped patch of land, cleared from the surrounding forest with immense effort. The soil is rocky and thin, a testament to the hard-scrabble reality of Scandinavian agriculture. Stumps of felled trees dot the landscape, too stubborn to be removed completely. The field is enclosed by a low wall of stacked stones, painstakingly cleared from the soil and piled up to mark the boundary and keep out any wandering livestock. Building and maintaining this wall is a job in itself. Your tools are waiting for you, leaning against the stone wall. Forget tractors or even horse-drawn plows. If your family is particularly well off, they might own an old, a simple, primitive plow, often just a wooden beam with a pointed tip, maybe reinforced with iron. It doesn't turn the soil over like a modern moldboard plow, it just scratches a shallow furrow into the ground. Guiding it is back-breaking work, requiring one person to push and steer while another leads the ox or, in many cases, two other people pull it with a harness. Yes, you might be the beast of burden yourself, but today, you're not using the art. The task is to break up the clods of earth in a newly cleared section, a job that requires more direct tools. You pick up your implement. It's a heavy, clumsy-looking hoe. The handle is a rough, hand-hewn piece of wood, unsanded and unforgiving on your palms. The head is a simple piece of iron, painstakingly forged by the local blacksmith and precious beyond measure. You also have a wooden mallet for breaking up larger, more stubborn clumps of dirt and rock. These are your instruments for the day. You find your spot and begin. You raise the heavy hoe and bring it down, the iron blade thudding into the compacted, rocky earth. The impact jars your arms and shoulders. You swing again, and again. Your rhythm is slow and deliberate. Lift, swing, thud, lift, swing, thud. With each blow, you loosen a small patch of soil. Then you stoop, your back already protesting, and break up the clods with your hands or the mallet, tossing the larger stones to the side, adding them to the ever-growing wall. This isn't just labor, it's a full-body assault. Within minutes, your muscles begin to burn. Your breath comes in ragged puffs of white in the cold air. The repetitive motion chafes your hands against the rough handle, and you know that by the end of the day, you'll have new blisters to join the old calluses. There are no breaks, no designated coffee time. You work from the moment the sun is high enough to see until it's too dark to continue. The only pauses are to stretch your aching back, wipe sweat from your brow with a grimy forearm, or take a quick drink of water from a leather flask. You look across the field. Your entire family is engaged in this same struggle. Men, women, and even older children are all bent over the earth, their movements synchronized by the shared, grueling rhythm of survival. This is the great equalizer. While the chieftain might be planning a voyage or settling a dispute, his wife and children are likely out here with you, their hands just as dirty, their backs just as sore. The success of the harvest is a matter of life and death for the entire community, and everyone who can work must work. Here's a small, poignant detail of this life. The skeletal remains from this period often show evidence of severe osteoarthritis, even in relatively young adults. The sheer physical toll of daily life farming, grinding grain, carrying water, chopping wood wore down their joints prematurely. A 35-year-old Viking might have the worn-out skeleton of a modern 60-year-old. The constant, grinding pain in your back, your knees, and your shoulders isn't a temporary symptom, it's a permanent feature of your existence. The historical debate here centers on the division of labor, while the sagas in popular culture focus heavily on the male roles of warrior and raider. Archaeology and historical analysis show that society was completely dependent on the labor of those who stayed behind. But who did what? Exactly were certain farming tasks strictly gendered? Did women exclusively manage the dairy and textiles while men handled the grain, or was it a more fluid, all-hands-on-deck system where roles blurred based on necessity, season, and the number of available people? The evidence suggests the latter was more likely. But the precise social dynamics of the Viking Age farm remain a subject of active research. Hours pass, the sun crawls across the sky, but the day stretches on, an eternity of thudding hoes and aching muscles. You lose track of time, your world shrinking to the next patch of stubborn earth, the next rock to be tossed aside. This is the reality behind the feasts and the long ships. It's the endless, repetitive, and exhausting work of coaxing life from an unforgiving land. And this is just one day. You'll be back here tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. You pause for a moment to catch your breath, leaning heavily on the rough handle of your hoe. Your back screams in protest, and your palms are slick with a mixture of sweat and the beginnings of a new blister. You look down at the tool in your hands. This simple assembly of wood and iron. It feels primitive, inefficient, almost laughably crude. And yet, you understand with a deep, weary certainty that this object represents the pinnacle of technology available to you. Let's take a closer look at your high-tech equipment. The wooden handle is likely made of ash or elm, woods chosen for their strength and straight grain. It was cut at a sawmill and sanded smooth by a machine. Someone in your family, perhaps your father or an older brother, would have spent hours shaping it with a draw knife, shaving off strips of wood until it had a usable, if not entirely comfortable, tone. It still has not some imperfections that dig into your skin. The real treasure is the iron head. Iron, in your time, is not a cheap or common commodity. The process of creating it is long, difficult, and almost magical. First, men have to find bygone, a type of iron ore that forms in swamps and wetlands. They have to dig up these reddish, rusty lumps of earth. Then, that ore needs to be smelted in a bloomery, a small, clay-built furnace. This process involves layering the ore with charcoal and heating it to an incredibly high temperature for hours, using hand-pumped bellows to force air into the furnace. It's a hot, smoky, and exhausting job. The result is not a clean ingot of liquid iron. It's a bloom, a spongy, porous mass of iron mixed with slag and other impurities. This bloom then has to be reheated and hammered repeatedly by a blacksmith. Each strike of the hammer squeezes out more of the slag and compacts the iron. It's a physically demanding and highly skilled art. The blacksmith, the smear, is one of the most respected and vital members of your community. He makes everything from nails and knives to axe heads and jewelry. The iron head of your hoe represents a significant investment of labor and resources. If it were to break, it would be a minor disaster for your family, requiring a trip to the blacksmith and a payment perhaps in grain, wool, or silver to have it repaired or replaced. You glanced over at the yard, the simple plow resting by the stone wall. Its design has barely changed in 1,000 years. It's a testament to the slow, incremental pace of technological change. There are no ball bearings, no complex gears, no hydraulic assistance. Every piece of machinery is powered by muscle, whether human or animal. The cart used to haul stones from the field has solid wooden wheels, not spoked ones, making it incredibly heavy and difficult to pull, especially through the mud. The axe used to fell trees as a relatively small iron head to conserve precious metal, requiring more swings and more effort from the user. A fascinating, if somewhat grim, aspect of Viking Age tools is how they reflect the value of their materials. Archaeologists often find tools that have been repaired over and over again. A broken knife blade might be reforged into a smaller one. A cracked axe head would be patched and welded. Nothing was disposable. This mindset extends to everything. A broken clay pot would be carefully drilled with small holes along the cracks and then laced back together with sinew. A worn-out tunic would be patched with scraps of other fabric until it was more patched than original cloth, before finally being torn into rags for cleaning. You live in a world without waste because you live in a world without abundance. The question of technological transmission in the Viking world is still a matter of some academic debate. How did a new idea, like a slightly better plow design or a more efficient way to build a longhouse roof, spread from one community to another? There were no technical manuals or engineering schools. Knowledge was passed down from parent to child, from master to apprentice. Traders and raiders undoubtedly brought back new ideas and objects from the lands they visited, like the high-quality steel from the Rhineland, known as Ulfbr-HT swords, which were vastly superior to local iron. But how quickly and widely did these innovations disseminate through the isolated rural communities of Scandinavia? Was it a rapid process, or did some valleys remain technologically behind their neighbors for generations? The uneven distribution of artifacts suggests it was a slow and patchy process. You shift your grip on the hoe, trying to find a more comfortable position that doesn't aggravate your blisters. You feel the immense gap between the effort you are expending and the result you are achieving. You are fighting against the earth with tools that are only marginally better than sticks and stones. Your entire world, from the food you eat to the house you live in, is built on this foundation of intense physical labor, mediated by the simplest, most hard-won technology. There is no machine to make your life easier. There is only the tool in your hand, the strength in your muscles, and the long, long hours of the day ahead of you. As you toil in the field, hacking up the stubborn earth, you see a figure approaching from the direction of the neighboring farmstead. It's your neighbor. No, he isn't smiling. His face is set in a grim, stony expression, and he walks with a purpose that makes the small hairs on your arms stand up. Your father, seeing him too, straightens up from his work and rests his hands on his hips. A silent, watchful posture. Work in the field around you slows to a halt as everyone turns to watch the unfolding scene. Knut stops a respectful distance away, but his voice carries clearly in the still air. He claims one of your family's sheep has wandered onto his land and eaten some of his newly sprouted grain. It's a small thing, a minor transgression, but in this world, small things have a way of becoming very, very big things. Your father denies it. He says all his sheep are accounted for and that Knut must be mistaken. Knut's face darkens. He calls your father a liar. And there it is. The spark. An accusation of dishonesty is a grave insult to a man's honor, his most valuable possession. The tension ratchets up instantly. The air, already cold, seems to drop another 10 degrees. This is no longer about a sheep and some grain. It's about reputation, respect, and social standing. In a society with no central police force to appeal to, a man's word and the perception of his strength are all he has to protect his family and property. You're re-witnessing the fragile nature of social bonds in the Viking Age. While communities could be close-knit and supportive, they could also be simmering pots of rivalries and old grudges. Your neighbor is not necessarily your friend. He is your competitor for scarce resources, for land, for pasture, for status. The person you share a fence with could be a trusted ally in a time of crisis, or the man who burns your longhouse down while you sleep. This small argument could now spiral out of control in several ways. If cooler heads prevail, it might be resolved with a payment. Your father might offer Knut a bit of silver or a length of wool cloth to smooth things over, not as an admission of guilt, but as a gesture to keep the peace. But if honor is deemed to be too deeply wounded, it could escalate into a blood feud. A blood feud, or BLOFND, is a terrifyingly logical extension of this honor-based system. If not were to harm your father in a fit of anger, your family would be socially and morally obligated to seek revenge. Not just you, but your uncles, your cousins, your entire kin group. You would be expected to avenge the slight, either by killing Nut or one of his close male relatives. And if you succeeded, his family would then be obligated to take revenge on you. This cycle of violence could continue for generations, a dark, bloody thread weaving through the history of two families. Long after the original cause, a sheep, an insult, a stolen piece of land, was forgotten, the Icelandic sagas are filled with these epic, tragic tales of escalating feuds that consume entire families and districts. A particularly strange and dangerous element of these disputes was the concept of insult itself. Viking society had a formalized, almost poetic, way of insulting each other called ne. This wasn't just simple name calling. Ne was a powerful, often magical, form of slander, the most potent form accused a man of being unmanly or sexually receptive, RG, which was the gravest insult imaginable. Carving such an insult on a post and pointing it at your enemy's farm was considered a profound provocation that almost always demanded a violent response. It was verbal warfare that could easily lead to the real thing. Historians are still debating the true prevalence and nature of the blood feud. Were the epic, multi-generational feuds described in the 13th century sagas an accurate reflection of life in the 9th and 10th centuries? Or were they literary exaggerations, romanticizing a more violent past? Archaeological evidence, such as mass graves or strategically fortified farmsteads, suggests that large-scale violence was indeed a feature of life. However, it's also clear that society had mechanisms to prevent every dispute from erupting into open warfare. The pressure from community elders, the threat of legal action at the local assembly, and the simple, pragmatic desire to avoid a destructive cycle of killing likely resolved more conflicts than violence did. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of society, where the threat of feud was always present, a powerful deterrent that shaped every social interaction. Back in the field, your father and Knut are still locked in a standoff. Their hands are now resting on the hilts of the long knives, or seax, that every free man carries at his belt. The argument has reached a critical point. The rest of your family watches, silent and tense. Your heart pounds in your chest. This morning, you were worried about business. Now, you're worried about whether you'll have to avenge your father's death by the end of the week. This is the constant, simmering anxiety that underpins your entire existence. Your friendly neighbors are just one insult away from becoming your mortal enemies. Fortunately, the tense standoff in the field doesn't erupt into immediate violence. One of the older men from your family, your great-uncle, steps forward. He is a man whose beard is more grey than reed, a man who has seen enough of these disputes to know how they end. He speaks in a low, calming voice, not taking sides, but suggesting that this is a matter not for knives, but for the thing. The thing, or king in Old Norse, is the central pillar of your legal and political world. It's an open-air assembly where all free men of the region gather to settle disputes, pass laws, and make important community decisions. It is your courtroom, your parliament, and your public square, all rolled into one. Your father and Knut, after a long, hard stare, both give a curt, reluctant nod. The matter will be taken to the thing. This isn't a victory, but a deferral. The conflict has just become more formal. A few weeks later, the day of the thing arrives. You travel with your father and the other men of your family to the designated meeting place. It's often a significant landmark, a large hill, a sacred grove of trees, or a field by a lake. As you approach, you see that dozens, maybe hundreds, of people are already there. It's a major social event. Farmers, chieftains, merchants, and warriors from all over the region have gathered. Tents are pitched, merchants have set up stalls to sell their wares, and the air is buzzing with conversation and the smell of cooking fires. You make your way to the heart of the assembly, an area marked by a circle of stones or wooden posts. This is the sacred space where the legal proceedings take place. There is no judge in a black robe, no fancy courthouse. The assembly is presided over by a law speaker, an individual elected for his deep knowledge of the tribe's ancestral laws. His job is not to judge, but to recite the law from memory for all to hear, ensuring the proceedings are conducted correctly. It's an incredible feat of memorization, as the laws are not written down but passed orally from one law speaker to the next. Your father's case against Knut is called. There are no lawyers to argue on your behalf. Each man must plead his own case. Your father steps forward and makes his accusation. Knut has falsely accused him of theft and, more importantly, has damaged his honor by calling him a liar in front of witnesses. Then, Knut steps forward and tells his side of the story, claiming his accusation was just and that your father's sheep did indeed cause damage. How is a verdict reached in a he said? He said situation like this, it's not based on evidence in the modern sense. It's based on oaths and reputation. Your father must swear a solemn oath to the gods that his claim is true, but his oath alone is not enough. He needs oath helpers, a number of other respected men from the community, who will step forward and swear that they believe his oath is clean and not perjured. They are not swearing that they witnessed the event, they are swearing to your father's character. They are putting their own honor on the line for him. You watch anxiously as your father calls his oath helpers. An uncle, a cousin, a trusted friend from another farmstead. They step forward one by one and place their hand on a sacred ring, often dampened with the blood of a sacrificed animal, and swear their support. Then Knut does the same, calling his own kinsmen and allies. The outcome of the case now depends on a complex social calculus who can bring more, or more highly respected, men to swear for them. It's a system that heavily favors the wealthy and powerful, those with extensive networks of kin and allies. Justice is not blind, it's a popularity contest where your social standing is your greatest legal asset. A curious and somewhat baffling feature of this system was the trial by ordeal, though it became more common later in the Viking Age with Christian influence. If a case was impossible to solve through oaths, the accused might be forced to, for example, carry a piece of red-hot iron for a set distance or pluck a stone from a cauldron of boiling water. Their hand would be bandaged, and if after 3 days the wound was healing cleanly, they were deemed innocent. If it was festering, they were guilty. It was believed that God or the gods would intervene to protect the innocent. For you, it's a terrifying thought, your fate decided not by facts, but by chance and the resilience of your skin. The role and power of the thing are still a topic of intense scholarly discussion. Some historians view it as a remarkably democratic and egalitarian institution for its time, giving a voice to all free landholders. Others argue that it was largely a tool for the elite, a public stage where powerful chieftains could legitimize their authority and marginalize their rivals through the manipulation of oaths and alliances. Was it a genuine court of the people? Or was it political theater with a predetermined outcome? The sagas provide examples supporting both interpretations, suggesting the reality was complex and varied across different regions of the Viking world. After hours of speeches and oaths, the elders of the Thingkentra, they deliver their judgment. Knut is found to be in the wrong. He is ordered to pay your father a fine, a specific amount of silver, publicly declared to restore his honor. Knut accepts, his face grim. The feud is officially over, settled by law other than blood. But as you walk away, you see the look in Knut's eyes. The law has been satisfied, but the resentment remains. You may have won in the eyes of the community, but you've also solidified an enemy, and you're left to wonder if this legal victory has made your family safer, or just postponed the inevitable. The judgment at the thing has been rendered, the fine paid. The dispute with Knut is, in theory, settled. But, as you walk away from the assembly, you overhear two men talking about another dispute. one that couldn't be solved with fines and oaths. It's a matter of deep insult and contested land, and it has been decided that it will be settled by a holmgang. A shiver, colder than the wind, runs down your spine. The word alone conjures images of brutal, final violence. A few days later, word spreads through the community. The holmgang is happening. Curiosity, mixed with a morbid sense of dread, is a powerful force. You, along with many others from your settlement, make your way to the designated site. It's often a small island home, hence the name island going or a remote, secluded clearing, away from the main farmsteads. The idea is to create a contained, ritualized space for combat. As you arrive, you see the arena has been prepared. It's not a grand stadium. It's a square piece of ground, perhaps 10 feet by 10 feet, marked out with stones or hazel poles. Sometimes, a turquoise hide is spread on the ground, and the duelists must fight upon it. The rules are ancient and specific, recited aloud for all to hear. The combatants are allowed a set number of shields, usually 3. If a man's shield is broken, he can take another, but once his third is gone, he must defend himself with his weapon alone. They must stay within the marked square. If a combatant places 1 foot outside the boundary, he is considered cowardly. If he places both feet outside, he is fled and lost automatically. The 2 duelists step forward. They are not strangers, they are men from neighboring valleys. You recognize them. They have traded at the same markets, attended the same feasts. Now, they are here to kill each other over a disagreement that has festered into a nearest love or point of honor. They are stripped to the waist, their torsos bare despite the cold. This is to show they have no hidden armor. They are armed with a sword or an axe, and their 3 shields are stacked nearby, ready. A hush falls over the crowd. The door begins. It is not the flashy, acrobatic sword fighting you might imagine from stories. This is brutal, clumsy, and terrifyingly real. It's a contest of strength and stamina. The men circle each other, their movements heavy and deliberate. They heave their heavy shields, trying to block the crushing blows from their opponent's axe. The sound of steel hitting wooden leather echoes through the clearing. A percussive, sickening thud. A splintered piece of a shield flies through the air. This is not just a fight, it's a legal instrument. The holmgang was a recognized, legitimate way to settle a dispute in the early Viking Age. The winner of the duel was considered to be in the right. It was believed that the gods, particularly the god of justice, Tyr, would favor the truthful man. The loser, if he survived, not only lost the dispute but also his armor and was often required to pay a hefty fine. If he was killed, his opponent was not considered a murderer. The killing was legally sanctioned. The property or right being disputed, be it land, an inheritance, or compensation for an insult, went to the victor. It was the ultimate form of trial by combat. One of the most peculiar and debated aspects of the holmgang was its potential for abuse. In the later sagas, a figure known as the berserker or professional duelist sometimes appears. These were men who would reportedly challenge smaller, less experienced landowners to a holmgang for their property. The landowner had a terrible choice: refuse the duel and be branded a coward, losing his honor and social standing, or accept the duel and almost certainly be killed by a superior fighter. This practice became so predatory and disruptive that the holmgang was eventually outlawed in Iceland and Norway in the 11th century, replaced by more civilized legal processes. The debate among historians is whether these predatory holmgangs were a common reality or a trope used in the sagas to create villainous characters. Was this a genuine social problem, where bullies could legally steal land through force of arms, or is it an exaggeration? The very fact that laws were passed to ban the practice suggests that the abuse was real enough to warrant a societal response. It represents a fascinating tension in Viking society, a deep respect for law and procedure existing side by side with a system that could be ruthlessly exploited by the strong. Back at the clearing, the fight has reached its climax. One man, his first 2 shields shattered, is tiring. His movements are slower, his blocks more desperate. His opponent sees an opening. He fights with his axe, and as the defender moves his shield to block, the attacker quickly reverses his swing, bringing the axe down on the man's exposed leg, just above the knee. The man screams, "Ugh, horrible sound," and collapses to the ground, his leg grievously wounded. The duel is over. He has not been killed, but he is defeated and maimed for life. His opponent stands over him, panting, chest heaving. The victor. You turn away, a sick feeling in your stomach. You have just witnessed a man's life and fortune be ruined in a matter of minutes. The law has been served, honor has been satisfied, but the result is just a bleeding man in the dirt and a community that will have to live with the consequences. You walk home in silence, the cheers of the winning side and the groans of the losing side fading behind you. The image of the axe falling, the sound of the man's scream, it will not leave you for a very long time. You return to the longhouse, the brutal spectacle of the home gang still fresh in your mind. The smoky air inside feels less like a comfort and more like a confinement. As you settle back into the rhythms of home life, you start to notice the people who exist on the periphery, the ones who don't join the conversations by the fire, who don't have a voice at the thing, and whose honor is never a cause for duels. These are the thralls, the slaves. You see a woman, not much older than yourself, kneeling on the packed earth floor, grinding grain. Her movements are mechanical, her face devoid of expression. She uses a saddle quern, a large, stationary stone on which she pushes a smaller, loaf-shaped stone back and forth, crushing the grains between them. It's incredibly labor-intensive work, performed for hours every single day. Her name is something you might not even know. She is simply the woman who grinds the grain. You see a man, his back scarred with old whip marks, hauling buckets of water from the well. He mucks out the animal stalls, carries firewood, and does all the heaviest, dirtiest, and most undesirable jobs. He eats after everyone else has finished, sleeps in the coldest part of the longhouse or in a separate, cruder hut, and wears the most ragged clothes. He is property, no different from an ox or a sheep. Slavery was an integral and brutal part of the Viking economy. The society you live in, with its far-flung trade networks and trading expeditions, is built on the backs of these people. Where did they come from? Some were born into it. The children of thralls. Others were people from your own society who had fallen into debt and were forced to sell themselves or their children into servitude. Many, however, were captured in raids. The Vikings who sailed to England, Ireland, Francia, and the lands of the Slavs weren't just looking for silver and gold. They were looking for people. Human cargo was one of the most profitable commodities. These captives were brought back to Scandinavia to work on farms, or sold in the great slave markets of the day, like Dublin or Dubai. A thrall's life is one of complete submission. They can be bought and sold, beaten, or killed by their owner with no legal consequences. The law does not recognize them as people. If someone else were to kill your family as thrall, they would simply have to compensate your father for the loss of property, the same as if they'd killed his best milk cow. The bond between a master and a thrall was absolute. A particularly grim and fascinating archaeological find sheds light on this dark reality. In several Viking Age burials of high-status individuals, archaeologists have found the remains of other people buried alongside them, often in contorted positions and showing signs of violent death. For example, at a site in Flagstad, Norway, 10 bodies were found in a single grave, several of them decapitated. It is widely believed that these were thralls, sacrificed to serve their master in the afterlife. The idea of being a servant for your entire life, only to be killed and buried so you can continue your servitude after death, is a chilling window into the thrall's world. The academic debate surrounding thralldom in the Viking Age is complex. While everyone agrees it existed and was widespread, historians argue about the potential for social mobility. Was it a permanent, inescapable condition? The sagas occasionally tell stories of a thrall who, through loyalty or exceptional skill, is granted their freedom laced in GI by their master. A freedman occupied a precarious middle ground in society, no longer a slave but still dependent on their former master for protection and patronage. How common was this? Was freedom a realistic hope for the average thrall? Or was it a one-in-a-million chance? A narrative trope to highlight the generosity of a particular chieftain. The evidence is scarce, but it's likely that for the vast majority, thralldom was a life sentence. You watch the grain-grinding woman. Her hands are raw, her knuckles swollen. The fine dust from the flour coats her face, giving her a ghostly pallor in the dim light. You realize the relative freedom you enjoy. The right to speak, to own property, to defend your honor is defined by its absence in her life. Your social standing, your very identity as a free person, exists only in contrast to her bondage. She is the silent, invisible engine of your household. Her endless labor frees up your family to engage in other tasks: weaving, fighting, farming, fielding. The entire social structure you take for granted rests on the fundamental, brutal inequality you see in her tired, rhythmic movements. Her existence is a constant, quiet reminder that, in your world, there are fates far worse than a hard life of physical labor. There is the fate of being a tool, a possession, an invisible person. The planting season is over. The seeds are in the ground. Then now begins the long, anxious wait. The success of the harvest depends not on your hard work, but on forces far beyond your control: the sun, the rain, the whims of the earth. This deep-seated feeling of powerlessness in the face of nature fosters a profound and pragmatic relationship with the supernatural. It's time to ask for help from those who hold the real power. Your chieftain announces that a blot, a sacrificial ceremony, will be held to ensure a good harvest in the favor of the gods. This is not a quiet, personal prayer. It's a major communal event, a feast and a ritual that binds your community together and reinforces your shared cosmology. On the appointed day, your family gathers with others at a sacred site. It might be the same place as the thing, or perhaps a grove of ancient trees, or a place with prominent standing stones, believed to be focal points of supernatural energy. The air is festive, a release from the daily grind, but underneath the socializing, there's a current of solemnity, of serious purpose. At the center of the ceremony are the animals chosen for sacrifice. For an important occasion like this, it might be a horse, a particularly powerful and sacred animal to your people, or several pigs, goats, or cattle. The animals are led to a sacrificial altar, which might be a large, flat-topped stone. The chieftain, or sometimes a specialized priest known as a GOII, presides over the ritual. He raises a ceremonial axe or knife and begins to chant, his voice calling out to the gods. He might invoke Thor for protection, Freyja for fertility, but for a good harvest. The primary recipient of this offering is Freya, the god of sun, rain, and bountiful crops. With a final, loud invocation, he dispatches the animal. The blood is collected in a large bowl. This blood is considered to be charged with power, a sacred liquid that forms a bridge between your world and the world of the gods. Then begins the most visually striking part of the ritual. The priest takes a bundle of twigs, dips it into the bowl of blood, and splatters it everywhere. He splatters the walls of the nearby temple if there is one. He spatters the carved wooden idols of the gods. And then he walks among the crowd, splattering the blood on you and your family. You feel the warm, sticky liquid on your face and clothes. This is not seen as frightening or disgusting. It is a blessing, a way of sharing in the power of the sacrifice and marking yourselves as participants in this pact with the divine. After the ritual, the practical part begins. The sacrificed animals are butchered, and the meat is cooked in great cauldrons over roaring fires. A massive feast commences. This is a rare opportunity to eat your fill of fresh meat. Large horns are filled with ale or mead, and they are passed around the circle. With each pass, a toast is made first to the gods, thanking them for past fortunes and asking for future ones, then to the chieftain, honoring his leadership, and finally to the memory of great ancestors. The drinking is heavy and enthusiastic. The feast is a way of communally consuming the offering, sharing the blessed meal with each other and, symbolically, with the gods themselves. One of the more obscure and debated figures in this religious landscape is the Volva, a female seer or shaman, while the Goa managed the public, formal rituals. The Volva dealt in a more personal, mystical kind of magic known as seer. She could reputedly see the future, influence fate, and communicate with spirits. A famous account from the Saga of Eric the Red describes a Volva visiting a farm in Greenland during a famine. She performs a complex ritual, chanting and entering a trance state to discern why the famine is happening and when it will end. These women were both respected and feared, operating on the fringes of society, but holding immense power. You might consult one in secret if you were worried about a difficult childbirth or the outcome of a sea voyage. The exact nature and beliefs of Norse paganism are a huge area of academic contention. The problem is that we have almost no written sources from the pagans themselves. Most of what we know was written down by Christians like Snorri Sturluson in Iceland, to centuries after the official conversion to Christianity. They were recording the old myths and practices, but they were doing so from a Christian perspective, and they may have misunderstood, reinterpreted, or even deliberately altered the material. Was there a single, unified Norse religion? Or was it a highly diverse and localized set of folk beliefs that varied from valley to valley? Did they truly believe the elaborate tales of Odin, Thor, and Loki as literal truth? Or were these stories more symbolic? We are essentially looking at a lost religion through the eyes of its successors, and separating fact from later interpretation is a constant challenge for historians. As the feast winds down and the fires burn low, you feel a sense of renewed hope. You have done your part. You have shown your respect to the gods, reinforced your bonds with your community, and filled your belly with meat and ale. But as you walk home under a sky full of stars, a sliver of the old anxiety remains. The offering has been made, the rituals observed, but the gods are notoriously fickle. All you can do now is wait, and watch the sky, and hope. The weeks after the blot are filled with the familiar routines of summer. You tend to the vegetable garden, repair tools, and watch the fields of barley and rye slowly turn from green to gold. The harvest looks promising this year. A collective sigh of relief seems to pass through the community. But just as the anxiety about food begins to recede, a new, more personal threat emerges. It starts with a cough. One of the children in the longhouse develops a hacking, persistent cough. At first, no one thinks much of it. Children are always getting sick. But this cough deepens, settling into his chest. He becomes feverish, his breathing shallow and dragged. He grows weak, refusing food. Your mother tries to soothe him with teas made from local herbs, but they do nothing. The child is suffering from what you would call pneumonia. But in your world, there is no name for it other than lung sickness. There is no understanding of bacteria or viruses. Sickness is a mysterious affliction, perhaps a punishment from the gods, a curse from an enemy, or just bad luck. You watch helplessly as the child fades. The festive atmosphere of the longhouse is replaced by a heavy, fearful quiet. Everyone tries to go about their daily tasks, but their eyes keep darting towards the small, struggling figure on the sleeping platform. There is nothing anyone can do but wait. After a week, the child's breathing stops. The silence that follows is profound and chilling. This is the brutal reality of health in the Viking Age. A simple infection that modern medicine could cure with a single course of antibiotics is a potential death sentence. And it's not just respiratory illnesses. A few days later, while out chopping wood, your axe slips. It's not a deep cut, just a nasty gash on your forearm. You grimace, wrap it in a strip of cloth torn from an old tunic, and carry on. You don't wash it with soap and water. The concept of antiseptic cleaning is centuries away. You certainly don't apply an antibiotic ointment. For 2 days, it seems fine. Just so. But on the third day, You notice the skin around the cut is red and swollen. It feels hot to the touch. Eye-throbbing pain begins to radiate up your arm. By the fourth day, you feel sick. You had a fever, and shivers rack your body. The wound has started to weep a thick, yellowish pus. The infection is no longer localized, it has entered your bloodstream. You now have sepsis. You are put to bed, your body alternating between burning fever and bone-chilling cold. Your family gathers around, their faces etched with worry. They try the traditional remedies. They might make a poultice of chewed-up yarrow, a plant known to have some styptic properties, and apply it to the wound. They might chant spells or leave offerings to Aya, the goddess associated with healing. But the infection is raging deep inside you, far beyond the reach of herbs and prayers. A little-known and rather desperate medical practice of the time was the porridge test for abdominal wounds. If a warrior had been stabbed in the gut, it was hard to tell if the intestine had been perforated a certain death sentence. So the healer would feed the patient a strong-smelling porridge, often containing onions or leeks. If they could then smell the leeks coming from the wound, they knew the gut was pierced, and the patient was beyond saving. It was a crude, but gruesomely effective, diagnostic tool. The state of Viking Age health is a source of continuous discovery and debate for bioarchaeologists who study human remains. Skeletons reveal a population plagued by a host of ailments. Aside from the worn-out teeth and osteoarthritis, they find evidence of vitamin deficiencies like scurvy and rickets, especially in subadults. They find healed fractures, indicating that people did survive broken bones, but the bones are often poorly set, which would have resulted in lifelong pain and limited mobility. They also find evidence of chronic infections in the bones, a condition called osteomyelitis, which would have been excruciatingly painful. The debate isn't about whether life was hard, but how hard. Was the average Viking a resilient, healthy individual who occasionally fell prey to an unlucky infection? Or was the baseline state of existence one of chronic pain and recurring illness? The skeletal record seems to point towards the latter. Life was a constant negotiation with pain. You lie on your straw mattress, delirious with fever. Your arm is a swollen, discolored mass of agony. The world fades in and out of focus. You see the concerned faces of your family, hazy and distant. You hear their hushed, worried voices. You are a strong, healthy young person, but you have been brought low by something you cannot see or understand. A tiny, invisible invader has breached your body's defenses, and your world has no weapons to fight it. Your fate now rests entirely on the strength of your own immune system. As you drift in and out of consciousness, you understand a terrifying truth in your time. The line between life and death is impossibly thin, and all it takes to cross it is one unlucky slip of an axe, one breath of infected air. Your fever rages on. The infection in your arm has become a life-or-death crisis, and your family decides that folk remedies are not enough. It is time to summon the Elkanir, the healer. This is not a decision taken lightly. The healer's services are not free, and their methods can be as frightening as the illness itself. The healer arrives a day later. He is an older man, his face a road map of wrinkles, his hands stained with herbs and tinctures. He doesn't carry a black bag full of sterile instruments. His tools are contained in a simple leather pouch, a few bronze or iron knives of different sizes, a pair of forceps, a small saw, and various dried herbs, roots, and animal parts. He examines your arm, his expression unreadable. He prods the swollen, inflamed skin around the wound, causing you to cry out in a fresh wave of agony. He smells the wound, nods grimly, and announces his verdict. The evil in the wound must be let out. His treatment is swift and brutal. There is no anesthesia, no sterile preparation. The only pain relief you might be offered is a leather strap to bite down on and a few strong relatives to hold you still. The healer takes one of his small, sharp knives wiped clean on a rag, not sterilized, and lenses the most swollen part of the infection. The pressure is released in a gush of pus and blood, the pain so intense that your vision whites out for a moment. But the healer is not done. He is determined that the flesh around the wound is dead and rotting, and it must be removed to allow for healing. This is a concept known as debridement, and surprisingly, it's one of the few things they got right, even if they didn't understand the reason why. He takes a heated iron rod from the long fire. You see it coming, glowing a dull red, and your heart hammers against your ribs in sheer terror. Before you can properly react, he presses the hot iron into the open wound. The sound of your own flesh sizzling, the horrific smell, and the searing, all-consuming pain is beyond anything you have ever imagined. This is cauterization. It's a desperate, agonizing method to stop the bleeding and burn away the bad tissue. You scream until your throat is raw, your body thrashing against the hands that hold you down. This violent form of treatment was a reality. Archaeological finds support this. The skull of a woman found in Gotland, Sweden, shows evidence of T-rapanation, a hole being drilled into her skull, possibly to relieve pressure or let out evil spirits. Incredibly, the bone shows signs of healing, meaning she survived the procedure. Skeletons of warriors often show healed but traumatic injuries, suggesting that while their medical knowledge was primitive, their ability to deal with battlefield trauma was practiced. If horrifying, they knew how to set bones, stitch wounds with sinew, and, as you've just experienced, cauterize them. One of the more peculiar medical beliefs revolved around something called the elf shot. If a person or an animal suddenly fell ill with a sharp, internal pain, it was sometimes believed they had been shot by an invisible arrow fired by an elf or some other supernatural being. The cure involved a ritualistic process, often including a salve made from a bizarre list of herbs and the use of a knife from the handle of which the elf shot would be symbolically scraped away. It's a fascinating insight into how they blended the physical and the magical, seeing no real distinction between a natural illness and a supernatural attack. The efficacy of Viking Age medicine is a topic of considerable debate among historians and archaeologists. On one hand, analysis of plant remains unwritten sources shows they had a decent working knowledge of herbal remedies. They used jarrow to stop bleeding. Meadows water is a pain reliever. It contains salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin, and various mosses as wound dressings due to their antiseptic properties. They clearly weren't just guessing. On the other hand, their complete lack of germ theory meant that even their best efforts were a gamble. A healer might stitch a wound perfectly but use a dirty needle, condemning the patient to a fatal infection. So were they pragmatic proto-scientists making the best of what they knew? Or were their successes just happy accidents in a system dominated by superstition? The answer is probably a messy combination of both. The healer finishes his work. He packs the cauterized wound with a mixture of moss and herbs and binds it tightly with a clean strip of linen. He gives your father instructions, collects his payment, perhaps a silver coin or a young goat, and leaves. You are left lying on your pallet, trembling and drenched in sweat, your arm a universe of throbbing pain. The ordeal is over, but the battle for your life has just entered a new phase. Will the healer's brutal intervention have been enough to turn the tide against the infection, or has he only prolonged your suffering as you drift into an exhausted, pain-filled sleep? You can only hope that the cure doesn't end up being as deadly as the disease. Miraculously, you survive. The fever breaks. The brutal cauterization, combined with your own immune system, manages to fight off the infection. Your arm is a mess of scarred, burned tissue, and it will never have the same strength or flexibility again. But you are alive. You are a walking testament to the grim resilience of your people. As you slowly recover, you watch the fields ripen under the late summer sun. The harvest is good. The dog worked, or perhaps it was just a lucky year. The longhouse is filled with the bounty sacks of grain, bundles of dried herbs, and barrels of preserved fish. But as autumn deepens, a different kind of anxiety begins to settle in. You look around at your family. It's a large one. Another one of your aunts just had a baby. Your older brother got married, and his wife is now another mouth to feed. The longhouse, which felt spacious in the summer, now feels crowded. The land you farm, which seemed adequate, now feels small. One evening, as the family sits around the long fire, your father and the other senior men begin to talk. Their voices are low and serious. They speak of the farm's yield, the number of people it must support, and the coming winter. The conclusion is unspoken but hangs heavy in the smoky air. There is not enough. The farm, as productive as it is, has reached its limit. It cannot sustainably support the growing population of your kin group. This is the fundamental, driving pressure of your society. The system of inheritance is a major part of the problem. In many parts of Scandinavia, the eldest son inherits the family farm, the OAL. This keeps the farm intact and prevents it from being divided into smaller, unworkable plots. But what about the second, third, and fourth sons? What about their children? They have no land, no inheritance, no future here. They become a landless class, dependent on their older brother's generosity, a source of labor but also a drain on resources. This is why the sea calls. The call of the sea is not a romantic whisper of adventure and glory. It's a desperate shout, a command born of necessity. Going a Viking is not a hobby, it's a high-risk, high-reward economic strategy. It's a solution to the problem of too many people and not enough land. Raiding, trading, exploring, these activities are an essential pressure valve for your society. They offer the landless a chance to acquire wealth, land of their own in a new place, or at the very least, enough silver to return home and buy their own farm, securing their status and their future. You listen as the men begin to plan. They speak of joining a chieftain from the next fjord over, a man known for his successful voyages. They are planning an expedition for the following spring. It's not presented as a choice. For the younger sons, for men like your cousins who have no prospect of inheriting land, this is their only path forward. They can stay here and be a burden, or they can risk their lives on the open ocean for a chance at a better life. A strange and often overlooked aspect of this outward expansion was its effect on the marriage market. The sagas are full of men going abroad to make their fortune before they can marry a woman from a good family. A man with no wealth or land was not a good match. This created a demographic of young, unattached, and ambitious men with very little to lose and everything to gain, a volatile and highly motivated force. Perfect for the dangers of a Viking expedition, the promise of not just wealth, but also the ability to start a family, was a powerful motivator. The classic historical debate on this topic is the why of the Viking Age. What caused this sudden, violent expansion out of Scandinavia in the late 8th century? Was it purely this demographic and economic pressure, the land hunger theory, or was it driven by other factors? Some historians point to political consolidation, as powerful kings began to emerge in Denmark and Norway, forcing their rivals to seek their fortunes elsewhere. Others suggest it was a reaction to the expansion of the Carolingian Empire to their south, a preemptive strike or a desire to tap into which new trade route. Still others focus on technological innovation, specifically the development of the longship, which gave them an unparalleled maritime advantage. The most likely answer is that it wasn't one single cause, but a perfect storm of all these factors: a surplus of young men, a shortage of good land, political instability, and a revolutionary new ship that made the world their oyster. The decision is made. A handful of the young men from your family, including one of your older brothers, will go. The mood in the longhouse shifts. There's a nervous excitement, but it's laced with a deep, gut-wrenching fear. Everyone knows the risks. For every man who returns with silver arm rings and tales of adventure, there are others who simply disappear. Their ships swallowed by the waves, their bodies left on a foreign shore. You look at your brother, and you see the hope in his eyes, but you also see the fear. He is not an adventurer seeking thrills. He is a farmer's son, forced into the role of a warrior by the simple, brutal arithmetic of survival. The sea is not a choice, it is the only option left. The long, dark winter passes in a haze of smoke, stories, and anticipation, as the ice on the fjord begins to break up and the days grow longer. The talk of the voyage turns into action. It's time to prepare the ship. But this isn't a matter of simply pulling a vessel out of storage. A new longship is being built by the chieftain your brother plans to follow, and all the men who will sail on it are expected to contribute their labor. You go with your brother to the construction site near the water's edge, a place buzzing with activity. Your first impression of the longship under construction is one of sleek, organic beauty. It doesn't look like it's being built, it looks like it's being grown. The keel, the long backbone of the ship, is a single, massive oak timber, expertly shaped. The hull is being built using the clinker method, where the planks, or strakes, overlap each other like shingles on a roof. This is the secret to the longship's legendary strength and flexibility. You are put to work. Your task is to help prepare the planks. This involves taking long, straight-grained oak logs and splitting them with wedges and mallets. The logs are not sawn. Sawing cuts across the wood's natural grain, weakening it. Splitting the log follows the grain, ensuring each plank retains its maximum natural strength. It's slow, painstaking work that requires a deep understanding of the wood. After the planks are split, they are shaped with axes and adzes. Their surfaces smoothed down until they fit perfectly against their neighbors. Then comes the fastening. Each overlapping plank is held together with iron rivets. This is another critical job. A small team works in tandem. One man on the outside holds the rivet head against a heavy hammer, while a man on the inside, in the cramped, dark space of the hole, pins the other end of the rivet over a washer, a process called roving. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of their hammers is the constant heartbeat of the construction site. It will take thousands of these rivets to complete the hull. As you work, you begin to appreciate the sheer genius of the design, but also its terrifying limitations. The hull is incredibly shallow, designed to ride high in the water. This allows it to sail up rivers and be beached on any sandy shore, which is a massive tactical advantage. But it also means there is no below decks. There is no cabin, no shelter from the elements. The entire ship is open to the wind, the rain, and the spray of the waves. The only comforts are the rowing benches, which also serve as storage chests for personal belongings, and a single, large, square sail made of heavy wool. This sail is a technological marvel in itself. It's made from the wool of hundreds of sheep, spun and woven by the women of the community, to make it water-resistant and durable. It's coated in a mixture of tallow, fish oil, and ochre, which often gives it a reddish-brown color. This sails the ship's engine, but it's only effective when the wind is at your back. If the wind is against you, the only option is to row. A curious detail you notice is the method for waterproofing the gaps between the planks. This process, called caulking, involves stuffing the seams with tarred animal hair or wool. You see women and children sitting for hours, twisting sheep's wood and horsehair into long cords, which are then coated in sticky pine tar. These cords are hammered into every single seam of the hull. It's a messy, smelly, but absolutely vital job. A poorly caulked ship is a ship that will sink. The exact process of Viking ship design and construction is still a subject of some scholarly inquiry, primarily because they left no blueprints or written instructions. Our knowledge comes almost entirely from archaeology, the spectacular ship burials found at places like Osberger and G. Okstad in Norway, and from painstaking experimental archaeology, where modern researchers build and sail replicas to understand how they worked. One of the ongoing debates is about the division of labor and the role of the master shipwright. Was there a single designer who held the entire complex plan in his head, directing the work like a modern architect, or was it a more communal, tradition-based process, where a group of experienced builders worked from a shared mental template, passed down through generations? The incredible consistency in design across different finds suggests a highly refined and standardized tradition. But the identity of the Viking naval architect remains a mystery. After weeks of hard labor, the ship is finished. It's launched into the fjord, a moment of great celebration and pride. It hits on the water, looking both powerful and fragile. The dragon's head, carved with fearsome, intricate patterns, glares out from the prow. It's a masterpiece of craftsmanship, a testament to your people's skill. But as you look at its open deck and low sides, you can't help but feel a knot of dread. This beautiful, deadly-looking vessel is what your brother will call home for the next several months. It offers almost no protection from the cold, the storms, and the vast, indifferent ocean. It is less a sea-faring vessel and more a beautifully crafted, open-topped coffin waiting for the sea to claim it. The day of departure arrives on a grey, overcast morning. The fjord is calm, its surface like dark glass, reflecting the cloudy sky. The entire community has gathered at the shore to see the long ship off. The mood is a strange mix of feigned confidence and raw, unspoken fear. Women, children, and old men line the water's edge, their faces tense. Your brother and the other men who are joining the expedition are loading their personal chests onto the ship. These chests, which also serve as their rowing seats, contain everything they will have for the journey: a spare wool tunic, a blanket, a sharpening stone for their axe, a wooden bowl and spoon, and maybe a few personal items: a comb made of bone, a gaming piece, a small token from a loved one. There is no room for sentimentality, every item must be essential. The ship is loaded with provisions for the first leg of the journey: barrels of fresh water, sacks of hard, doctor bread, salt and fish, and tubs of soured milk and butter. It seems like a lot, but you know it has to last an unknown number of men for an unknown number of weeks. The chieftain gives the order to board. Your brother gives you a quick, hard embrace. His rolled tunic is coarse against your cheek. "Look after the son," he says, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. You nod, unable to speak. He claps you on the shoulder and then turns and wades into the shallow, icy water to climb aboard. He finds his place on a rowing bench, stows his chest, and looks back at the shore one last time, his face a mask of determined optimism. The sail is still furled around the mast, to leave the narrow fjord. They must row. The chieftain, standing up a tiller in the stern, gives a sharp command. 30 oars, their long shelves of pine or ash, dip into the water as one. With a great, collective grunt, the men pull. The long ship glides forward, silent and graceful. Another stroke, and another. The ship picks up speed. The rhythmic creak of the oar locks and the splash of the oars the only sounds breaking the morning stillness. You stand on the shore, watching the ship get smaller and smaller. It becomes a silhouette, then just a dark Swiss hint on the water, the men aboard it reduced to indistinct shapes. It rounds a headland at the mouth of the fjord and disappears from view, and then it is gone. They are now on their own, facing the vast, open expanse of the North Sea, and they are navigating almost blind. Forget GPS, forget charts, forget even the magnetic compass that hasn't been introduced to Europe yet. Their primary navigation tool is the sun. On a clear day, they can use its position at midday to get a rough sense of their latitude. But what happens on a day like today, when the sky is a blanket of uniform grey? This is where the true, terrifying uncertainty of their journey begins. They navigate by experience and a deep, intuitive knowledge of the natural world. They follow coastlines whenever possible, memorizing landmarks: a distinctively shaped cliff, a river mouth, a distant mountain peak. This is known as land pilotage, but to cross the open sea, from Norway to Shetland or Iceland, they have to leave the land behind. They sail by the sun, by the stars at night, and by something far more subtle: the patterns of the waves, the direction of the swell, the flight paths of birds, and even the distant glimpse of a cloud bank that might indicate land beyond the horizon. One of the most debated and semi-mythical Viking navigational tools is the sunstone, mentioned in one of the sagas. The Solsteinen was supposedly a type of crystal that, when held up to the sky, could reveal the position of the sun even on a completely overcast day by polarizing the light. For a long time, historians dismissed this as pure fantasy. However, modern experiments with certain types of crystals found in Scandinavia, like cordierite, have shown that it is, in fact, possible. Could your brother's chieftain have such a magical seeming stone on board? It's possible, but it would have been rare and precious. The other great unknown for your brother is time. How long will the journey take? A good wind could see them cross the North Sea in a few days. But if they are becalmed, or face relentless headwinds that force them to row for days on end, the journey could stretch into weeks. Their food and, more critically, their fresh water are finite. Every extra day at sea is another day closer to starvation and dehydration. This uncertainty is a source of much scholarly debate. How did the Vikings so successfully and consistently navigate such vast and dangerous oceans to reach Iceland, Greenland, and even North America? Was it purely this accumulated, experience-based knowledge passed down through generations of sailors, or did they have more systematic methods and tools, like the sunstone, that we are only now beginning to rediscover and understand? The sagas are frustratingly vague on the practical details, focusing more on the heroics and the drama than the mundane realities of staying on course. It's as if, to them, the how was so obvious it wasn't worth mentioning, leaving us to piece together the puzzle from archaeological clues and educated guesswork. As you turn to walk back to the longhouse, the emptiness of the fjord feels immense. You try to picture your brother out there, on that vast, grey, featureless expanse of water. He is a farmer, not a sailor. He is pulling on an oar, his back already aching, his eyes fixed on the horizon, heading towards a destination he has never seen. Guided by methods that seem little better than a prayer, the adventure has begun, and so has the terror. Weeks have passed since the long ship disappeared. Back home, you have fallen into the rhythm of summer farm work. But not a day goes by that you don't look out towards the fjord and wonder where your brother is. For him, life has shrunk to the dimensions of the ship. The world of wood, moors, and water. His glorious adventure has become a monotonous, miserable, and deeply uncomfortable ordeal. The first enemy is the sea itself. The long ship, so graceful in the calm fjord, is a terrifying thing in the open ocean. Its flexible hull, which is its great strength, means that it visibly twists and contorts with the waves. The entire vessel groans and creaks, the timbers flexing under the strain. It feels less like a solid ship and more like a living creature in agony. The waves of the North Atlantic are not gentle swells. They are huge, grey mountains of water that lift the ship up, offering a terrifying, panoramic view of the endless, churning sea, before dropping it sickeningly into a deep trough, the world disappearing behind a wall of water. Then there's the sea's intricacies. For the first few days, your brother, like many of the less experienced men, is wretchedly ill. There is nowhere to go, no private place to be sick. He etches over the side, his stomach empty, his body weak. The old, experienced sailors mock him, but it's a good-natured mockery. They have all been there. He has to learn to find his sea legs, to move with the constant, unpredictable motion of the ship, a skill that comes only with time and misery. The second enemy is the wet and the cold. The ship is completely open. When it rains, everything and everyone gets soaked. The wool tunics and cloaks become heavy with water, clinging to the skin and sucking away body heat. There is no fire on board. An open flame on a wooden ship is unthinkable. There is no hot food, no warm drink. Every meal is cold and eaten with wet, numb fingers. At night, the men huddle together for warmth under their damp blankets, trying to sleep on the hard wooden chests while the cold spray of the waves washes over them. The risk of hypothermia is constant. The food, once a source of comfort, becomes another trial. The hard bread is still hard, but now it's also damp. The salted fish is intensely salty, making them constantly thirsty. The butter has started to go rancid. But the worst part is the water. It's stored in wooden barrels, and after a few weeks at sea, it's no longer fresh. It's stale, tastes of wood, and sometimes has a slimy film on the surface. But it is the most precious thing on the ship. It is rationed carefully, each man getting just enough to survive. A strange and disgusting little secret of life at sea was the vermin. The sacks of grain and bowls of food would inevitably attract mice and rats that came aboard in port. But more pervasive were the lice. In the cramped, unwashed conditions, body lice would flourish, infesting the men's clothing and hair. The constant itching would be a minor but maddening source of misery. The bone and antler combs found in almost every Viking grave weren't just for vanity, they were essential tools for combing out lice and nits. Historians and archaeologists are still trying to understand the full picture of life on board these ships. How did they manage sanitation? Where did they relieve themselves on a ship crowded with 30 or 40 men? There were likely buckets, which would be emptied over the side. But the conditions must have been incredibly unsanitary. A more contentious debate is about their diet at sea and the prevention of diseases like scurvy. We know from later ages of sail that a lack of vitamin C on long voyages was devastating. Did the Vikings suffer from it? Some theories suggest they may have carried things like onions, or perhaps even skyer, which might have retained some vitamin C. Others posit that they were simply never at sea long enough on any single leg of a journey for scurvy to become a major problem. It remains an open question. For your brother, the days blur into a miserable cycle. Wake up, cold and damp. Eat a miserable breakfast of hard bread and salt fish. If there's wind, he helps manage the sail. If there's no wind, or the wind is wrong, he rows. He pulls on the heavy oar, his back and shoulders in constant protest, his hands twisted and drawn. He rows until he feels like his arms will fall off, and then he keeps rowing. The world is reduced to the back of the man in front of him. The rhythmic splash of the oars, and the vast, monotonous grey of the sea and sky. There is no glory here. There is no epic adventure. This is the truth of the voyage. It is a grinding, miserable test of human endurance. The real battle is not against a foreign army, but against the sea, the cold, the hunger, and the mind-numbing boredom. He thinks of the longhouse, of the warmth of the fire, of the bowl of hot porridge, and these simple comforts feel like an impossibly distant, luxurious dream. He is learning the first and most important lesson of being a Viking. Before you can conquer anything, you must first survive the journey. After what feels like an eternity of grey water and damp misery, a cry goes up from the lookout perched at the masthead land. Your brother scrambles to his feet, his heart pounding. On the horizon, a smudge of darker grey, a thin line that separates the sea and the sky. It's land. The mood on the ship transforms instantly. The exhaustion and misery are replaced by a surge of adrenaline and predatory excitement. This is the moment they have been waiting for, the reason for their suffering. The chieftain steers the long ship towards the coast, scanning for a suitable target. They are not looking for a fortified city or a large army to fight. That would be suicide. They are looking for a soft target, an isolated farmstead, a small, undefended village, or, best of all, a monastery. Monasteries, they have learned, are perfect. They are often built in remote locations, are poorly defended, and, most importantly, are filled with wealth gold chalices, silver crucifixes, embroidered vestments, and illuminated manuscripts. To the monks, these are sacred objects. To your brother and his shipmates, they are just treasure. They find their target, a cluster of stone buildings on a small island just off the coast, marked by a simple stone cross, a monastery. The chieftain gives his orders. The raid will happen at dawn. They beach the long ship in a secluded cove, the shallow draft allowing them to run it right up onto the sand. The men leap out, silent and swift. There is no glorious, horn-blaring charge at the beat. This is not a battle, it's a smash and grab. Your brother's hands are sick with sweat as he grips the handle of his axe. His shield, a simple circle of wood with an iron boss, feels heavy on his arm. He is a farmer who has held an axe his whole life to chop wood. Now, he must be ready to use it on a person. The men creep up the hill towards the sleeping monastery. There are no dramatic speeches. The plan is simple: get in, grab anything of value, and get out before any organized resistance can be mounted. They storm the main chapel, kicking in the heavy wooden door. The scene inside is one of chaos and terror. The monks, woken from their sleep, are unarmed and completely unprepared. They cry out in a language your brother doesn't understand, their faces pale with fear. The Vikings are mercilessly efficient. Some men head straight for the altar, tearing down a silver cross and stuffing golden goblets into sacks. Others round up the terrified monks. Your brother finds himself face to face with one of them. A young man his own age with wide, terrified eyes. The monk babbles, holding up a crucifix as if to ward him off. For a split second, your brother hesitates, but then one of the older warriors shoves him forward, yelling at him to get on with it. He shoves the monk to the ground, his heart hammering. He doesn't kill him. He can. Instead, he helps bind the monk's hands with a leather thong. The captures are valuable, too. They can be sold as thralls. The entire raid is over in less than 20 minutes. It is a whirlwind of shouting, smashing, and looting. It's not a heroic clash of warriors. It's a brutal, one-sided home invasion. The Vikings are not berserkers in a mystical trance. They are pragmatic and terrifyingly focused. They move from building to building, grabbing liturgical treasures, food supplies, and any able-bodied captors they can find. A strange and often misunderstood target of these raids was books. The richly illuminated manuscripts produced in monasteries, like the Book of Kells, were works of art. The Vikings couldn't read the Latin text, but they recognized the value. They would often tear off the jeweled covers and discard the pages. However, sometimes the books themselves were taken. A famous example is the Codex Aureus, a magnificent Anglo-Saxon gospel book that was looted by Vikings in the 9th century. We know this because a note was later added in the margin by an English nobleman who bought it back from the heathen army. A fascinating receipt for a transaction between raider and victim. The nature of these early raids is a subject of historical debate. Were they really as mindlessly violent and destructive as the clerical accounts our main source of information make them out to be? The monks who wrote about the attacks had every reason to portray the Vikings as monstrous agents of Satan, attacking God's defenseless servants. Some historians argue that the violence may have been more strategic. Killing everyone meant no one was left to produce more wealth for you to steal next time. Taking captives to sell as slaves was often more profitable than murder. So was the goal extermination? Or was it a form of violent, parasitic extortion? The reality likely varied greatly from raid to raid, depending on the commander, the circumstances, and the level of resistance they met. The chieftain signals the retreat. The men fall back to the long ship, carrying their loot and dragging their new captives. They leave behind a scene of devastation: smashed doors, desecrated altars, and the weeping, terrified survivors. They push the long ship back into the water, jump aboard, and begin to row, not stopping until the looted monastery is a distant speck. Your brother looks down at his hands. They are steady now. He didn't kill anyone, but he was part of it. He was one of the wolves. The farmer from a quiet fjord has now become a raider. The excitement he feels is mixed with a sour taste of shame and fear. He has his first taste of the Viking life, and it is nothing like the glorious sagas. The adrenaline of the raid fades as the long ship puts distance between itself and the smoldering monastery. The men are exultant, loudly comparing their loot, boasting of their prowess. They dump the sacks of treasure onto the central decking, a glittering pile of gold, silver, and precious cloth. The chieftain will distribute it later, according to each man's status and contribution. For now, the sight of it is enough. This is what they came for. This is the tangible proof of their success, that the raid was not without cost. As the initial excitement subsides, the injuries become apparent. One man has a deep gash on his shoulder, taken from a desperate monk who fought back with a farming tool. Another has a broken finger, his hand smashed by a closing door. Your brother, who thought he had escaped unscathed, looks down and sees that his arm is bleeding. In the chaos, he didn't even feel it along. Cello slice along his forearm, probably from a splintered piece of wood. The ship becomes a makeshift infirmary. The men tend to their own wounds and each other's. Their medical knowledge a patchwork of practical experience and folk belief. The man with the broken finger has it roughly set by a shipmate and bound with splints made from all fragments. For the deeper cuts, the treatment is what you would expect. The wound is washed, not with antiseptic, but with stale water or even urine, which was sometimes used due to a belief in its cleansing properties. It's then packed with a wad of moss or cloth and tightly bound. Your brother cleans his own cut. It's not deep, but it's long. He wraps it with a strip of linen torn from a looted altar cloth, a strange juxtaposition of the sacred and the profane. As he ties the knot with his teeth, he looks at the man with a gash on his shoulder. The man's face is pale. The wound is bleeding sluggishly. They have no way to stitch it properly. The best they can do is bind it as tightly as possible and hope the pressure stops the bleeding. This is the grim aftermath of glorious combat. Every wound, no matter how small, is a roll of the dice. Your brother thinks of his own infected arm back on the farm, of the healer's glowing iron, of the weeks of fever and agony. He looks at his new wound, and a cold dread washes over him. He survived the raid, but he could still die from it, days or weeks later, in the middle of the ocean, from a simple, dirty cut. The real enemy was never the monks, it is the invisible world of infection that follows every act of violence. A fascinating and macabre detail about Viking injuries comes from their dental records. In several archaeological sites, male skeletons have been found with deep, horizontal grooves intentionally filed into their front teeth. These grooves were often filled with a colored pigment, like red resin. Why would they do this? It was likely a form of warrior intimidation, a way to look more fearsome in battle, like a permanent, terrifying grin. But these deep grooves would have also weakened the teeth and been a potential site for infection, a painful price to pay for a fearsome appearance. It's a testament to how central a warrior identity was for some of these men. The long-term impact of non-fatal injuries is a subject of ongoing historical and archaeological study. Bioarchaeologists can see the evidence of this violent life written on the bones. They find skulls with healed sword cuts, femurs with poorly mended fractures from falls or blows, and vertebrae fused together from chronic stress. These men may have survived their battles, but they would have lived the rest of their lives with chronic pain, limited mobility, and disfiguring scars. The old warrior resting by the fire in the sagas was likely a man whose body was a roadmap of past trauma. The debate continues on how society viewed these men. Were they honored veterans? Their scars a mark of prestige, or were they, in a pragmatic sense, a burden, no longer able to contribute their full strength to the farm or the next raid? Your brother sits on his rowing chest, the looted treasure forgotten for a moment. He watches the wounded man, who is now shivering despite the mild air. The man's wound, and his own, are stark reminders of their fragility. The sagas sing of heroes who fight through grievous wounds, shrugging off injuries that would kill a normal man. But the reality on this ship is different. There are no magical healing potions, no vacuums to spirit them away. There is only dirty cloth, stale water, and hope. The glory of the raid has evaporated, leaving behind only the cold, hard currency of survival, the pain of an injury, and the gnawing fear of what will happen tomorrow. With the raid behind them and their hold glittering with fresh loot, the chieftain makes the call. It's time to head for home. A new kind of anxiety now grips the crew. The journey out was fueled by hope and ambition. The journey back is a race against time, a desperate attempt to deliver their newfound wealth safely to their families. The ship, now heavier with treasure and captives, feels more sluggish in the water. The return voyage is in some ways more perilous than the journey out. Their supplies, which were fresh at the start, are now dangerously low. The water tastes foul, the bread is moldy, and the last of the salt fish is gone. They are reliant on what they can catch from the sea, but fishing is unreliable. Hunger becomes a constant, gnawing presence. The captive monks, given the smallest rations, are gaunt and weak, their eyes hollow with despair. Then the weather turns. The gentle tailwind that had been pushing them along dies. and the sky to the west darkens to a bruised purple. A storm is coming. The experienced sailors recognize the signs instantly: the change in the swell, the ominous stillness of the air. The chieftain shouts orders. The precious sail is quickly furled and secured. The heavy cargo is lashed down. The men grab their oars, not to make headway, but to maintain control as the sea begins to heave. The storm hits them with the force of a physical blow. The wind howls, a demonic shriek that drowns out all other sound. Rain comes down in blinding, horizontal sheets, driven by the gale. The sea, which was merely rough before, transforms into a chaotic nightmare of towering, white-capped waves. The long ship is tossed about like a child's toy. One moment it's climbing a near vertical wall of black water. The next it's plunging into a chasm, the waves crashing over the sides, flooding the open deck with icy seawater. Your brother's world shrinks to a bubble of pure survival. He is bailing for his life, using his own shield as a makeshift bucket. Scoop, lift, throw, scoop, lift, throw. His muscles scream. His hands are numb with cold. But he doesn't stop. Everyone is bailing. The water slush is around their ankles, them their knees. The ship is dangerously swamped. The chieftain, a silhouette against the raging sea, fights the tiller, his face a mask of intense concentration, trying to keep the ship's prow pointed into the waves to prevent it from being swamped and capsized. This is the single greatest danger of their voyage. The long ship, for all its genius, is terribly vulnerable to being overwhelmed in a major storm. The low sides that make it perfect for raiding also make it susceptible to flooding. Countless ships and their crews were lost this way, vanishing without a trace. Their fate unknown to the families waiting for them back home. A strange and lesser-known peril of the return journey was not from the sea, but from each other. The ship is now filled with portable wealth. The bonds of loyalty that held the crew together on the way out could be frayed by greed and suspicion on the way back. The sagas tell tales of crews turning on their chieftain, or of factions fighting over the division of the loot. A man you trusted as your shield brother on the raid could become your murderer on the return voyage, all for an extra handful of silver. The chieftain has to manage not just the ship, but the volatile mix of exhausted, hungry, and newly rich men. Historians still debate the true mortality rate of these voyages. The sagas, naturally, focus on the successful ones. No one returns to tell the tale of a failed expedition. But how many ships that set out simply never came back? Was it 1 in 5, 1 in 3? We can only guess based on the inherent risks of their ships and their navigational techniques. Some archaeological evidence, like the famous ghost ship of the Riddarholm home wreck in Stockholm, shows a vessel that clearly sank with its crew. A snapshot of a final, desperate moment, but for most, their graves are the ocean floor. The question of whether the rewards of raiding truly outweighed the astronomical risks is a fundamental one. For many, it clearly didn't, but the potential payoff was so great that men were always willing to gamble. On your brother's ship, the storm rages for what feels like days. Men are exhausted, hypothermic, and terrified. One man is washed overboard by a rogue wave, his screams swallowed by the wind. There is no hope of rescue. He is gone. The captive monks, too weak to bail, huddle in the bilge, praying to their god. Then, as suddenly as it began, the storm passes, the wind drops, the sea calms, and a weak, watery sun breaks through the clouds. The crew, battered and depleted, surveys the damage. They have survived, but they are off course. Their food is ruined, and they have lost a man. The glittering pile of treasure seems like a mockery now, its value meaningless in the face of the ocean's power. Your brother looks at the horizon. He has no idea where they are. The triumph of the raid has been washed away, replaced by the grim, desperate reality of just trying to get home alive. After days of aimless drifting and desperate rowing, the weary crew finally spots a familiar landmark, a distant mountain peak they recognize. They are back in their home waters. The relief is so profound it's almost painful. They have made it, with renewed strength. They row the battered longship into their own fjord. As they round the final headland, they see the farmstead. People are running to the shore, shouting and waving. You are among them. Your heart leaping into your throat as you recognize the dragon-headed prow of the ship. Deobo, your brother is back. He is gone, his face weathered and thin, and his arm is wrapped in a dirty bandage. But he is alive. The joy of the reunion is overwhelming. A chaotic scene of embraces and tears and shouted questions. But the celebration is short-lived. The joy of their return is tempered by a new, creeping anxiety. The air has a different bite to it. The leaves have all fallen from the trees. The first snowflakes of the season drift lazily down from a grey sky. Winter is not coming. It is here. The precious, short Scandinavian summer is over. Now begins the long, dark, and dangerous season of cold and confinement. The treasures your brother brought back, the silver, the cloth, the captive monks who are now thralls will be vital for the community's survival and prosperity. But they cannot hold back the cold. The first task is to prepare the longhouse for its long hibernation. The livestock, which have been grazing in summer pastures, are brought in. The most valuable animals, the milk cows, the prize bull, the sheep needed for winter wool, are housed in and attached by rail, in some cases, right inside the longhouse itself. At one end of the great hall, their body heat will help warm the space. A practical but smelly solution. The air, already thick with wood smoke, now gains the additional, pungent aroma of manure and damp animal fur. The house itself must be fortified against the cold. The wattle and daub walls are inspected for cracks, and any gaps are re-plastered with a mixture of clay, dung, and straw. Extra layers of turf are piled against the outside of the walls for insulation. The precious, limited supply of firewood, chopped and stacked throughout the summer, is moved as close to the door as possible. This wood pile is the family's lifeline. Running out of firewood in the middle of a blizzard would be a death sentence. Food preservation is the most critical task. The grain from the harvest must be kept dry and safe from vermin. Meat is salted or smoked. Fish are hung from the rafters to dry until they are as hard as wood. Vegetables like turnips and carrots are stored in root cellars dug deep into the earth to protect them from the frost. Everything is about making the summer's bounty last through the long, lean months ahead. Failure to preserve food properly means starvation by late winter. A little-known aspect of their winter preparation involved their refrigeration techniques. Lacking electricity, they use mitra. A deep pit dug in the ground and lined with straw could keep root vegetables cool. For more effective cooling, they would use bog butter, large lumps of butter, or other fats sealed in wooden containers and submerged in a peat bog. The cool, low oxygen, and acidic environment of the bog would preserve the butter for years. Archaeologists occasionally find these ancient, waxy lumps, still technically edible, though probably not very tasty. The debate among historians about the Viking winter is focused on its psychological impact. We know about the physical hardships, but what did months of near total darkness and confinement do to people's minds in the far north of Scandinavia? The sun would disappear completely for weeks on end, a phenomenon known as the polar night. How did they cope with the seasonal depression? The cabin fever of being crammed into a smoky, smelly longhouse with dozens of other people. The sagas are full of dark deeds that happen in the winter, feuds that reignite. Murders committed in the close confines of a hole. Was winter a time of cozy storytelling and community bonding, as it's often portrayed? Or was it a period of intense psychological stress, boredom, and social friction? The answer is likely both. A volatile mix of camaraderie and conflict. As you help with the final preparations, you feel the world shrinking. The vibrant greens and blues of summer are gone, replaced by a monochrome world of white snow and grey sky. The door of the longhouse, which stood open all summer, is now kept firmly shut, the heavy bar in place. The outside world has become hostile, an enemy to be endured, not engaged with. Your brother, the great adventurer who crossed the sea and fought in a foreign land, is now like everyone else, are prisoner of the winter. The battle is no longer against storms or enemies, but against the cold, the darkness, and the slow, grinding passage of time. The great wooden door of the longhouse is barred. The snow outside is piling up against the walls, muffling the world in a thick blanket of silence. Your universe has shrunk to the dimensions of this single, thus true. This is your home for the next 4 or 5 months. Welcome to the long, dark night of the soul. The first few weeks might feel cozy. The central fire is kept burning day and night, a constant, glowing heart in the center of the hall. The initial hardship is replaced by a sense of security, of being safe from the howling wind and biting cold. But this feeling soon gives way to a new kind of challenge, the crushing, mind-numbing boredom. There is no farming to be done. The world outside is frozen solid. The daily routine becomes intensely circumscribed. The women of the household spend their days at their looms. The rhythmic clacking of the weaving swords and the soft thud of the loom weights filling the air. They are turning the summer's wool into the VIML cloth that your family uses for clothes, blankets, and sails. It's vital work, but it is repetitive and endless. The men's primary job is maintenance. They sit by the fire, sharpening their axes and knives, mending broken tool handles, carving new bowls and spoons, and repairing leather harnesses. Your brother, the returned raider, might spend hours polishing the silver he brought back. His brief, violent adventure now reduced to a quiet, repetitive task. Every tool, every piece of equipment, must be ready for the moment the spring thaw finally comes. The air in the longhouse grows thicker and staler with each passing week. The smoke from the fire pit never fully escapes through the hole in the roof, creating a permanent, eye-watering haze. The smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, edible manure, and cooking food combines into a potent, inescapable aroma. There is no fresh air. There is no privacy. You are never, ever alone. Every conversation is overheard. Every argument is public. Every sigh is noted. The small habits of your family members that were once endearing now become sources of intense irritation. The way your uncle slurps his stew. The way your cousin coughs without covering his mouth, these little things grate on your nerves in the close, unchanging environment. To combat the tedium, you rely on entertainment. This is the time for storytelling. In the evenings, the family gathers around the fire, and one of the elders might recite the great sagas from memory, tales of heroic ancestors, of mighty battles, of voyages to distant lands. They sing poems, tell riddles, and recount local gossip. This is how your history, your values, and your laws are transmitted from one generation to the next. A more hands-on form of entertainment was board games. The Vikings were avid gamers. Archaeologists have found numerous game boards and pieces for a strategy game called HNE for TFL, or King's Table. It's an asymmetrical game where one player, with a king and a small number of defenders, starts in the center of the board and tries to escape to the edge, while the other player, with a larger force of attackers, tries to capture the king. It's a game of pure strategy, a miniature battle played out on a wooden board. You and your brother might spend hours hunched over a HNE for TFL board. The game a welcome distraction from the oppressive sameness of the day. The psychological toll of the long winter is something modern science has given a name to: seasonal affective disorder SAD, but which you experience as a heavy, nameless lethargy, or winter sadness. A fascinating undebated theory among some scholars is that the Viking concept of the berserker might have a link to this psychological pressure. The berserker gang, the fit of uncontrollable rage and strength, is often depicted as a mystical battle fury, but some have theorized it could have been a kind of psychological break, a release of the immense spent-up frustration and aggression built up during the long, dark winters. Was it a sacred state, a genetic condition, or a form of seasonal psychosis? This remains a fringe but intriguing area of speculation. You find your own ways to cope. You focus on your tasks with intense concentration. You mend a fishing net, your fingers moving with practiced skill. your mind focused only on the knots. You help your mother grind the day's grain. The rhythmic back and forth of the querns turn a kind of meditation. You retreat into the world of stories, losing yourself in the epic deeds of Odin and Thor. But the confinement is a constant pressure. You feel the walls of the longhouse closing in. You long for the sun on your face, for the smell of fresh air, for a moment of true silence and solitude. The winter is a test of not just physical endurance, but of mental fortitude. It's a battle fought not with axes and shields, but with patience and resilience. Against an enemy you cannot see or fight the slow, suffocating passage of time in the dark. Deep in the heart of the suffocating winter, just when the boredom and confinement feel like they might actually drive you mad, a reprieve arrives. It's time for the midwinter feast, or Jollyul. This is the most important celebration of the year, a multi-day festival of eating, drinking, and ritual designed to mark the winter solstice, the turning point of the year when the days finally begin to grow longer again. Preparations for the feast are a welcome break from the monotony. The longhouse is given a thorough, if relative, cleaning. Fresh straw is spread on the floor. The best tapestries, woven by the women of the family, are hung on the walls. Their colorful depictions of myths and heroes a vibrant splash against the dark wood. The best of the preserved food is brought out. An animal that was carefully fattened through the autumn, usually a pig, is slaughtered. The smell of roasting pork, a rare and delicious luxury, fills the longhouse. A welcome change from the usual aroma of smoke and old stew. The women bake special bread, perhaps enriched with dried fruits or honey. Most importantly, the chieftain taps the strongest ale, the batch that has been fermenting since the harvest, reserved specifically for this occasion. On the first night of the feast, the atmosphere is electric. The lung fire roars, casting a warm, flickering light over the entire hall. The tables are laden with more food than you've seen in months. The whole community has gathered, your family, your neighbors, even Knut, who maintains a stony but peaceful truce for the festival, and any visitors who might be staying in the area. The feast begins with a ritual. The chieftain raises a drinking horn filled with ale and makes a toast to the gods, to Odin for wisdom, to Thor for strength, and especially to Freya for the fertility of the coming year. He then dedicates the roasted pig, the Sonargereltia, to Freya, and men lay their hands on its bristles to make solemn oaths and resolutions for the year ahead. Your brother, his hand on the wall, greasy hide, might swear an oath to join the next raid, or to build a new barn. These are not idle boasts. A Yule oath is considered magically binding. Then the drinking begins in earnest. The great horns of ale are passed around the hall, and with each pass, the mood grows louder and more boisterous. The strict social codes that govern your daily life begin to fray at the edges. Men who have been rivals all year might clap each other on the back, their animosity temporarily forgotten in a haze of alcohol. Stories are told with more embellishment, songs are sung more loudly, and laughter echoes off the high rafters. But the alcohol is a double-edged sword. While it can foster camaraderie, it can also act as a social lubricant for conflict. As the night wears on and the ale flows freely, old grudges can resurface. A misplaced word, a perceived insult, a boast that goes too far, any of these can be the spark that ignites a drunken brawl. A friendly wrestling match can turn serious. An argument over a past debt, or a stolen glance at another man's wife can escalate with frightening speed. The feast is a pressure cooker, and the alcohol is turning up the heat. A fascinating and bizarre tradition associated with Norse feasting and drinking was the formal flyting cena, a verbal duel of insults. Two individuals would trade increasingly elaborate and offensive insults, often in poetic form, trying to outdo each other in wit and vulgarity. A famous mythological example occurs in the poem Lokasena, where the god Loki crashes a feast and systematically insults every other god present. While this could be a form of entertainment, a real-life flyting, fueled by ale, could easily cross the line from ritualized insult to a genuine challenge to a man's honor, with violent consequences. The role of alcohol in Viking society is a topic of ongoing historical discussion. The sagas and poems are filled with references to ale and mead, and it's clear that drinking was a central part of their social and religious life. But was the primary goal simply intoxication? Some historians argue that these drunken feasts served a crucial social function, acting as a release valve for the pressures of their hierarchical and often violent society. It was a time when rules could be bent, allowing for a temporary chaos that ultimately reinforced the social order. Others contend that the sagas, with their focus on chieftains and warriors, give us a skewed perspective, and that the average farmer was likely far more moderate in their habits. The archaeological evidence, the presence of drinking horns in graves, the remains of breweries confirms its importance, but not the frequency or intensity of its consumption for the average person. You watch as two of your cousins, their faces flushed with ale, begin to argue loudly over a game of HNE4TFL. Their voices get louder, their gestures more aggressive. Your father quickly steps in, his voice a low, firm command that cuts through their drunken anger. He separates them, sending them to opposite ends of the hall to cool off. A fight has been averted, but the incident is a stark reminder of the volatile energy in the room. The Yule feast is a necessary and joyful celebration, a beacon of light in the winter's darkness. But it is also a dangerous time, a tightrope walk between communal joy and explosive conflict, where one wrong step could plunge the whole community back into the darkness of a feud. The Yule feast ends, and the long, slow grind of winter resumes. As the final months of cold and darkness drag on, you have more time to observe the people at the edges of the longhouse society, not the thralls, but the old. You look at your great-uncle, the one who prevented the fight with Nut. He sits close to the fire, his arms, gnarled with arthritis, held out to the warmth. He is a respected elder, his wisdom sought in disputes. His story is a highlight of the long evenings, but his existence is a precarious one. In your world, there is no concept of retirement. A person's value is tied directly to their ability to contribute. As long as an old man can offer wisdom, or an old woman can spin wool and watch the children, they maintain their place and their status. But what happens when they become too frail to work? Too sick to be of use, they become another mouth to feed, a burden on the family's limited resources. Your great-uncle's body is a testament to a hard life. His face is a latticework of scars from old battles. He walks with a pronounced limp, the result of a poorly healed leg fracture from a fall 30 years ago. In the mornings, he is stiff and slow to move, his joints aching from a lifetime of physical labor. He has survived to old age. But old age in your time is likely his late 50s or early 60s. Reaching what you might consider a really advanced age is incredibly rare. Life expectancy at birth is low, skewed by high infant mortality. But even if you survived childhood, a life of violence, disease, and grinding labor meant that few saw their 60th winter. The process of aging is not a gentle decline, it's a battle against accumulating injuries and chronic pain. The worn-down teeth that plagued you in your youth become a source of constant agony for the elderly. With the enamel gone, infections in the jaw are common, leading to painful abscesses and the loss of teeth, making it difficult to eat the tough, coarse food that makes up your diet. Your great-uncle often has to soak his hard bread in stew for a long time before he can chew it. A particularly poignant and debated practice from the sagas is the concept of the attest up the king cliff. According to some later legends, when an elderly person became a complete burden on their family, they would voluntarily commit suicide by throwing themselves from a high cliff. This was seen as an honorable way to die, saving their family from the difficulty of supporting them, and allowing them to die with dignity rather than fade away from sickness or starvation. However, most modern historians believe the attest-up is a myth, a piece of folklore rather than a historical reality. There is no solid archaeological evidence to support it, and the accounts appear in sources written long after the Viking Age. It is more likely a literary invention to explore themes of honor, duty, and the harshness of life. The debate continues. Though, was this an actual, if rare, social custom in times of extreme famine, or is it pure fiction for now? It remains in the realm of legend. It highlights, however, the very real anxiety surrounding old age and infirmity. The true fate of the elderly who could no longer care for themselves was likely far more mundane and tragic. They were dependent on the goodwill of their children. A respected elder with powerful, successful children would be well cared for. But an old person with no one to support them, or with children who were struggling to feed their own families, faced a grim future of neglect and slow decline. You watch your great-uncle as he teaches one of the young boys how to carve a wooden horse. His hands may be gnarled, but his skill is still there. He is passing on his knowledge, his stories, his experience. This is his contribution now. He has traded the strength of his youth for the wisdom of his age. His value has changed, but it has not disappeared. He is a living link to the past, a repository of the family's history and traditions. You realize that surviving to old age in this world is perhaps the greatest victory of all. It means you have survived childhood diseases. You have survived famines. You have survived battles and raids and infected wounds. You have survived the brutal, relentless attrition of daily life. Your great-uncle's wrinkled face and scarred hands are not signs of weakness, but a badge of ultimate endurance. He is a survivor, and in a world so keen on killing you, that is the most honorable title of all. Finally, it happens. A subtle shift in the air. The quality of the light changes, becoming brighter, sharper. You wake one morning to a new sound, the drip, drip, drip of melting snow from the eaves of the longhouse. The spring thaw has begun. It is slow, messy, and muddy process, but it signals the end of your long confinement. The great wooden bar is lifted from the door, and the world, smelling of damp earth and new life, rushes in. As your community slowly comes back to life, you begin to notice other changes, things that are not tied to the seasons. A trader visits the fjord, but instead of coming on a traditional longship, he arrives on a different kind of vessel and air. It's a wider, deeper, and slower ship, built not for raiding but for carrying cargo. He brings not just iron and salt, but new ideas. He speaks of a powerful king in Denmark who is consolidating the smaller chiefdoms under his rule. He talks of a new god, the White Christ, whose followers are building stone churches and whose priests condemn the old ways of blood and sacrifice. These are the first whispers of the end of an era. The world you were born into, a world of independent chieftains and localized power, is beginning to change. The forces of centralization, both political and religious, are gathering on the horizon. For centuries, your people's strength was their decentralization, small, fast-moving groups of warriors and traders who could strike and disappear. But now, larger, more organized powers are rising, both in Scandinavia and in the lands you raid. Your chieftain seems worried. His authority rests on his personal prestige, his success in raiding, and the loyalty of his men, but a distant king, with a professional army and the ability to levy taxes, represents a different kind of power, one that could make the local chieftain obsolete. Some chieftains are choosing to fight these rising kings, clinging to the old ways. Others, seeing the writing on the wall, are choosing to join them, becoming the king's local agents in exchange for power and titles. Your community is facing a choice: resist and be crushed, or adapt and be absorbed. Then, a missionary arrives in your fjord. He is a quiet man, dressed in a simple brown robe, but he speaks with a strange confidence. He doesn't carry a sword or an axe. He speaks of one all-powerful God who created the entire world, a God of love and forgiveness, not of fickle, feuding deities who demand blood sacrifice. He talks of eternal life in heaven, a peaceful paradise, as a reward for faith, contrasting it with the endless cycle of battle and feasting in Valhalla. Most of the older generation, like your father and great-uncle, scoff at him. They are loyal to the gods of their ancestors, the gods who have, in their eyes, granted them victory and good harvests. But you notice some of the younger people, and especially some of the women. Listen with interest. This new religion offers a different kind of power. It offers a moral certainty and a message of peace that is deeply appealing after a lifetime of violence and uncertainty. The promise that the meek shall inherit the earth is a revolutionary idea in your fiercely hierarchical world. The transition from Norse paganism to Christianity is one of the most significant and debated periods in Viking history. Was it a forced conversion, imposed from the top down by newly Christian kings who saw it as a way to legitimize their rule and integrate with the rest of Christian Europe, or was it a more gradual, organic process, with Christian ideas slowly seeping into the culture through trade and contact, eventually winning people over? The evidence suggests it was a complex mix of both. Kings like Olaf Tryggvason of Norway were known to have converted their subjects by force, but there is also archaeological evidence, like runestone nests with both crosses and hammers, or pendants that look like a mix of both symbols, suggesting a long period of religious coexistence and syncretism, where people might have hedged their bets and paid respect to both Christ and Thor. This dual faith period is a fascinating glimpse into a culture in profound transition. You watch the missionary from a distance. He represents a future that is both frightening and strangely alluring. His world has written books, unified kingdoms, and stone buildings that reach for the sky. Your world has sagas recited from memory, feuding chieftains, and smoky longhouses. You feel a sense of loyalty to the old ways, to the gods your brother prayed to before his raid, to the traditions that have shaped your life. But you also feel the undeniable pull of the new, the old world of the Vikings. The world of your ancestors is not being conquered by a foreign army. It's being slowly, irrevocably eroded by a new set of ideas, a new way of seeing the world. The sun is setting on the Viking Age, and you are living in its long, uncertain twilight. You lie on your platform in the longhouse, the familiar smoky air filling your lungs. It's late. The fire has burned down to a pile of glowing embers, and the hall is filled with the soft sounds of sleeping bodies. Outside, a gentle spring rain is falling, a soothing, rhythmic patter on the thatched roof. The anxieties of the changing world, the new kings, the new god fade into the background, replaced by a deep, weary stillness. Your great-uncle, his voice a low, raspy whisper in the darkness, has just finished telling a story. It was one of the grand, epic sagas about famous heroes. It was a local tale, a story about your own great-grandfather, a man who sailed to a land of ice and fire, who fought a polar bear, and who returned home with enough wealth to buy the land your family still farms. The story is well known to you. You've heard it a dozen times, but tonight it sounds different. You realize that this is how it all begins. This is where the legends are born. The brutal, terrifying, and often miserable reality of your life, the back-breaking farm work, the infected wounds, the gut-wrenching fear of a sea storm, the chaotic violence of a raid will all be smoothed over, polished, and transformed by the passage of time. Your brother's miserable, seasick journey across the North Sea will be forgotten. In the story, he will be a bold mariner, fearlessly commanding the waves. The brutal, messy raid on a defenseless monastery will be retold as a heroic battle against a powerful enemy. The infected cut on his arm will become a glorious war wound, a testament to his bravery. His story, your story, will be sanded down, its rough edges removed, until all that remains is the gleaming, heroic narrative. This is the alchemy of memory. The daily grind, the constant fear, the smells, the dirt, the endless discomfort, all of it will eventually fade away. What will be left is the highlight reel, the successful harvest, the victorious return, the glittering treasure. The sagas that you listen to with such rapt attention, the tales of Eric the Red and Ragnar Lothbrok, were they not once just as real, as messy, as mundane and terrifying as your own life? Those heroes were once just men, cold and hungry and afraid, trying to survive in an unforgiving world. A strange, almost comical piece of this transformation is the Viking helmet. You know for a fact that no one wears a helmet with horns on it. It would be incredibly impractical in a fight. A perfect handhold for an enemy to grab. The warriors, were simple. Comical helmets made of iron or leather, if they wear a helmet at all. Yet, centuries from now, this image of the horned helmet, a fantasy born from a 19th century opera costume, will become the defining symbol of your people. It's a perfect example of how the messy truth is replaced by a simpler, more dramatic fiction. The academic world is in a constant state of grappling with this very problem. How do we separate the historical Viking from the legendary one, the primary literary sources? The sagas were written down 200 to 300 years after the events they describe. In a Christianized Iceland, they are as much works of literature as they are works of history. Historians must constantly cross-reference these epic stories with the hard, silent evidence of archaeology, the bones, the tools, the house foundations, the graves. The debate is perennial. Where does the memory of the Viking Age end? In the mythologizing of it begin? Are the sagas a clear window into the past, or a distorted reflection? You pull your scratchy wool blanket up to your chin. You think of your own life. You have survived the smoky longhouse, the bitter cold, the threat of starvation, the simmering violence of your neighbors, the terror of disease. You are not a hero. You are not a legend. You are a survivor. And perhaps that is the most profound truth of the Viking Age. It wasn't about the glory of conquest, it was about the relentless, day-to-day struggle for existence. It was about enduring. As you drift off to sleep, the rain drumming a gentle lullaby on the roof, you had a final, fleeting thought. You imagine people, hundreds of years from now, sitting in warm, bright rooms, reading about your time. They will see the dragon ships, the silver hordes, the epic battles, and they will think of it as a grand, romantic adventure. They will have no idea what it truly felt like to be you. They won't know the smell of the smoke, the ache in your butt, the fear in your heart. They will only know the legend. And in a way, that is the final, strange victory of your people. Your brutal, difficult, and often painful reality will be reborn as one of the world's most enduring and exciting stories. The hardship will be forgotten, but the saga will live forever. The last ember in the long fire winks out, plunging the whole into a deep and profound darkness, broken only by the faint, silvery light of the moon filtering through the smoke hole. The rhythmic breathing of your family weaves a soft, comforting blanket of sound around you. The rain has softened to a gentle whisper, a final, calming hush. You feel the heavy pull of sleep, a current drawing you down into the quiet depths of your own mind. The long day is over. The endless cycle of work and worry, of fear and small joys, has finally come to rest. Your mind begins to drift, untethered from the hard straw mattress and smoky air. You are floating now, in that peaceful space between wakefulness and dream. The faces of your family, the feel of the axe handle, the chill of the morning air, they all begin to soften, their sharp edges blurring into the gentle landscape of your slumber. You are no longer in the longhouse. You are somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere quiet. Let the current carry you. There are no more tasks to complete, no more dangers to face. There is only the soft, welcoming dark, and the promise of a deep and restorative peace. Just let go and sleep. The end of the article. Good night.